Hey gang, welcome to the Great North Garage. My name's Corey. This is my 1982 Ferrari 308 GTSi. And if you've been following the channel, you'll know that we got the back end of the car back on the ground. It was in the air for a couple weeks doing the, we got the sway bar bushings done, the upper and lower control arm bushings, new brakes and calipers, or pads and calipers, and we also have new QA-1 Coilover shocks mounted on the back. So that brings us to today, where we got the front end of the car up, and now we're gonna do essentially the same thing on the front as we did on the back. Of course, now we have upper and lower ball joints and tie rod ends as well. And also the steering rack we're gonna change. This one actually has quite a bit of play in it. So I'm gonna make my first attempt at changing a steering rack. And why not do it in a Ferrari? I really can't wait to get this part of the car done, because then we can get the car on the ground with the new coilovers all the way around and get the ride height just to where we want it. I'm super excited about that. I cannot wait. Let's get started. So I've already got all the parts off the passenger side, and we got two of the bolts out for the steering rack already. So now we're just going to rip everything apart. I kind of wanted to do one side at a time complete like I did on the back, because I wanted to make sure I can use this for reference on the other side when I'm reassembling. But I think to get the steering rack off, it's really gonna just be a lot easier if I get this stuff out of the way, or at least part of it. Maybe if I just get the caliper off, or the brake rotor off, maybe, and the heat shield. Maybe we can get this off. I did already have this off, and that's why the caliper's not on it. And because I already took the caliper off, because I was gonna get these remachined, but I found a fella online who had a bunch of aftermarket ones at a reasonable price. So I ordered all new ones all the way around. I do have, there's probably still a lot of meat on those. Maybe it was a little wasteful, but I'm just getting so deep on this car. I would just really love to have the whole running gear basically new to start. So that was the reason for that, having the calipers off already. Heat shield, nice and simple. Or I guess not a heat shield, it should be dust cover. Is that what these are? Dust cover. One bolt, simple enough. Actually, maybe I just will get at the steering rack now, because I don't think this stuff's really gonna matter much. I gotta get way in there to get the steering rack out. I'm just gonna try it and see what happens. Okay, so I couldn't get to the nut and bolt that bolt the steering rack onto the spline of the steering column. So I'm gonna have to take this A-arm off to access it, just to get in there. But, so yeah, anyway, I'm trying to get this off. I got to pop the tie rod off. That came off fairly easily. Oh, there we go. We gotta remember the shims in here too. There's little shims right here. There's two on this side and two on this side, it looks like. So we gotta make sure we make notes of that. Make sure they go back in that way. Okay, what else can I do here? Can I just pry this out? Looks that way. So yeah, two shims each side. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to put them back like that just so we remember. So when we go to assemble the new ball joint, we'll have that for reference. There. One less thing to remember. Now, time to leak some brake fluid. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that one wasn't bad. I'm gonna get this guy out now. A little light in there, that might help. That popped out pretty easy. So we got the steering rack out. It was not very fun. It was probably the biggest pain in the butt job that I've done on this car so far. It's only 4 bolts. These 2 bolts, well 5 bolts, the 2 mounting bolts on each end, and then there's a bolt that holds the steering column shaft onto the spline here. This was really hard to get at. It's one of those one click at a time with the ratcheting wrench and just patience. You got to find a nice comfortable position to do it in. I'm sure a hoist would be a lot easier, but we don't have one, so I got to take these mounts off of this shaft or steering rack and put it on the new one. I also ordered new tie rods, but I'm a little disappointed in them. So these were the original ones. They're pretty beefy, and this was the nut that fastens to the spindle, and these are the new ones I bought, and this is the nut that holds it on there. So it's definitely not, it just doesn't seem as robust. And honestly, the tapered shaft didn't really seat. I tightened this up as much as possible and didn't really seat all the way flush as this one did, the original one. So I did order new ones from a different supplier. They actually have a castellated nut with a hole drilled through the thread. Just a little more safety. Never hurts with this kind of stuff. So I'm going to swap those mounting brackets off the old steering rack and put it on the new one, and we'll see if we can get this thing in. So what I'm also going to do is I left the nuts exactly where they were on the threads for the tie rods. Obviously it's going to have to go in for a alignment after, but to get it as close as I can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a caliper, and I'm just going to use that measurement there, and I'm going to put it on the new shaft with the same measurement, and hopefully that'll be a good starting point for at least getting it to the for the first test drive and getting it to the alignment place. Something else I want to do before I get the mounts off here is get the distance between the two mounts to make sure they're identical to when I put them on the new rack, because obviously that's pretty crucial. I'm going to orient these the same way. I'm going to say it's 34 millimeters. I'm not sure if this groove on here makes this so it has to go here. I know this side looks like it probably does, but I'm just in case I want to get those measurements. What did I say, 34 millimeters? I only have to measure twice, right? Yeah, 34 millimeters. Or, sorry, 304 millimeters. Yeah, and it's the same on both. Okay, so we're going to do that. Okay, so it definitely has this groove in here, which cradles in between here. So that makes sense. So I see it doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to line these shafts up by eyeball because I don't know how else to do this here. Looks close, I don't know. I guess I can always adjust these after once I get the steering column on. If it's a weird angle, I'll obviously be able to just loosen these nuts. These aren't lined up, it's going to be a real pain to get this thing back on. That looks really close. And I think it's as close as I can get it here. Okay, try and get this thing back into place. It's not going to be fun though, I know that. So now that we got the steering rack in, it's time to try to get all this together, all the control arms and shocks and front brakes and everything, and spindles and ball joints. Man, there's a lot of parts on this car. So we got new shocks. Shout out to Birdman on the Ferrari forum who kind of walks you through how to get the car a little lower, nicer stance, probably better riding, and actually take some weight off the car because these are a lot lighter than the stock Ferrari shocks. So for the front of the car, we're going with QA-1 DS402s. That's these guys. They're adjustable, and we got the 10HT300 springs for them. But what you need to do actually for the Ferrari is you need to go to unobtainium supply and get these, the tops of the shocks. You have to take the original ones off. I don't know where they went. So the reason you need this is because the original Konis that come on the Ferrari 308s have this sort of an extension. It's kind of tall here. And the original shocks, because they have to clear the top of the control arm here. You can see that. So there's just that has to kind of clear that. And when you get these from an unobtainium supply, let me throw this out. They have a little bit of a groove machined out. So it will make that clearance, and it also extends the top of the shock. So it basically matches the original one. These are great. They're made, they're kind of custom made by unobtainium supply, and they're listed as paperweights because they're not engineered, I guess, not stamped for approval, so they're just kind of, they're paperweights. But I have no concern about these doing the job because these are like 3 times heavier. These are actually made out of just a solid piece of, I don't know if it's aluminum or steel. It's really heavy, so I imagine it's steel. It just weighs a ton. It's super thick, super robust, so not concerned at all about any issues with this thing. So I'm going to assemble this. Pretty straightforward. Just turn the adjusters all the way down to the bottom. The nut at the top, you don't want it right on the bottom. I think you just want to kind of back it off a little bit. Put the spring on, just like that. So then we got this guy, and this needs to slide on top, just like that. And we want to take a little bit of Loctite on these threads at the top because you don't want this coming loose. So just a couple of drips. And then we want to thread this guy on. Just like that. Not that exciting. Okay, so now it's turning the nut inside there. So now we've got to get a wrench on there. Okay, so now we're going to get this driver's side together. We've got a lot of shims here for behind this bracket, which goes in this hole here. So it's going to be a little tricky to get the shims all stuck together so they don't fall out, but we're going to try. So I taped these in place for now, these the round spacers, and then these shims that are kind of fork shaped. I assume these are designed to sort of adjust the suspension settings and measurements on the fly, because these forks actually slide up between these little slots in the frame. So we'll get the round ones put in place for now, and then we will worry about the forks after. So now we'll slide these guys up. There we go. So we've got the lower control arm in with the shims and the studs on the back snugged up. So now we're going to put the upper control arm in with the shock. The shock goes here. But we definitely want this suspension to be all loaded up, so we'll get the jack under here and put pressure on everything. Before we snug up all the things to spec, because we don't want to have unnecessary wear on the bushings. So if you snug everything up and then you kind of set everything down to where it's supposed to be, you're kind of putting tension on everything. And when it's at neutral, everything's kind of at neutral with the car on the ground. You kind of want everything not sort of preloaded. So that's the idea with that. So we'll just get everything close, and then we'll drop the car and tighten everything. Okay, so now we got the bottom ball joint. I guess you call it a lower ball joint if you're a mechanic. And this was the old one. So I kind of reassembled it with the shims, one on the front, 2 on the back on this one, so we'll know how they go back together. Attach that in here. So we got to go through the block here for the sway bar. We got to go through the control arm, through the A arm or the ball joint, then through the shock, then the other side of both. So lots to kind of balance on here. So if we get lucky or not. Oh yeah, I got to put the shims in there too, so something else to balance. Look at this. Okay, so we've got this block first, Then we've got the control arm. Then we got the spacer. Then we've got the ball joint. Get that a little bit in there. Now we've got the shock. Jeez, I don't know how many hands this is supposed to take. Of course, everything's a snug fit as it's supposed to be. A little bit of force. Oh, it fell out. There we go. Come on, let's get lucky. Let's get lucky. Okay, we're in. Gotta back it off a little bit because we need that other shim. We have two shims in on this side. Or spacers, or whatever you want to call it. I'll just hold them together. This feels like it wants to. Oh. Okay, we're through. So, yeah. Lots of things to work its way through here. But hey, we made it. So now for the front bolt, we only have the ball joints and the spacers, so it'll be okay. I think. Yeah, just like nothing. Look at that. So excited to get these together. I forgot that I actually have to rebuild this block for the sway bar. A little bit ahead of myself. I'm actually going to leave this in there, so then everything will be lined up when I go to put it back, hopefully. I'll just stick that in there for now. So yeah, so I have a new insert to put in here with a new rubber bushing around it, and these guys are going to be replaced. Probably want to snug that guy up too. We don't want to wait too long to do that. I don't want to forget. So now, spindle goes on. Yeah, that goes there. Okay, so we've got the jack, got all the tension on the suspension. Now we're going to get our trusty torque wrench, torque everything down to spec. We're going to have to use our trusty little wrench holder for the torque of the upper right side of the control arm. So what you do is you have this holding your wrench. You can't get in with a torque wrench, and then you pop this guy in there. It's got a little 3/8 drive hole in there, and then you make sure that it's 90 degrees to the wrench, and the torque should be the same in theory. So that's what we're going to do. Waiting for the click. There we go. Okay. So I got the castellated nuts in with the cotter pins, and I forgot to put this bracket in for the brake hose under the castellated nut, so had to redo that, but got it all torqued down. We're good to go. Got the new brake shoes in, the new caliper, or the old caliper. Got the new brake shoes in. The old brake shoes actually weren't that bad on the front, but again, you know, while we're in there, it'll be nice to have brakes, new brakes all the way around, so I'm definitely glad we did it. Ferrari brakes actually aren't too bad. They're not paying the Ferrari tax on them. They're about 60 bucks a set from Bosch. Really actually fairly inexpensive, so it was definitely worth doing. I'm glad we did it. Now we're just going to get this back on the caliper, back on the spindle, and the dust cover on, and the tie rod in. And then I think we get the car on the ground. Exciting stuff. Nice new shiny rotor. Okay, we got to make sure that these little pins are lined up, so we got to go. Oh yes. A little bit of never sees around there just to keep the next people happy. So this little guy on top, we'll line up that way. Hey, we're pretty close. But not bang on apparently. $13 mil, I believe, yeah. We will get the, oh yeah, that's why this is not, that was looking easy to put this caliper on, because we have to work around this thing. Passenger side front all done, new ball joints, tie rod in, the coilovers are in, new sway bar bushing block, new rotor, new pads. So it's coming along really well. New bushings are in there. Even get this car back on the ground.